Hello, I'm Samata Pattinson, and this is the UN Forest Podcast. I'm an entrepreneur, sustainability advocate, and fashion passionate, and today I welcome you to Forests for Fashion. The World Bank estimates that the sale of clothes could increase by up to 65% by 2030. We're already buying much more than 20 years ago, but we also keep each item half as long. We've become accustomed to wear, break, dispose model. We're all victims of fashion trends, and fast fashion plays right into it. Why would you spend time and money repairing a broken garment when it's quicker and cheaper to simply buy a new one? The problem is that overconsumption increases the demand for raw material, puts pressure on ecosystems, and generates pollution and waste. All this comes with significant environmental costs. We need to slow down. Producing clothes requires many natural resources and emits greenhouse gas emissions responsible for climate change. When we let numbers speak, the picture is clear and worrisome. The fashion industry is responsible for 8 to 10% of global emissions, according to the United Nations, and that is more than aviation and shipping combined. Cotton, the most widely used natural fiber in the textile industry today, uses about 2.5% of the world's farmland, whereas synthetic materials, the most popular fibers in the world, require an estimated 342 million barrels of oil every year. What do forests have to do with this bleak picture? Using fibers made from wood can contribute to a sustainable and circular fashion industry. They move production away from oil-derived synthetic fibers and reduce the depletion of fresh water needed to cultivate cotton. From the extraction and supply of raw materials, the spinning and weaving of yarn and fabric, the manufacturing of garments, accessories, and footwear, to their distribution, consumption, and end of life, promoting sustainable patterns is not easy. Not only does it require political will and commitment, but also a shift in consumer attitudes. The good news is we can become sustainable fashion lovers. Together we can make sure that pathways are formed and sustainable fashion becomes indeed the new fashionable. With our experts today, we will explore how forests and new technologies are transforming the fashion industry into a more sustainable sector. It is my pleasure to welcome our guests, Mr. Ben Selby, Mr. Carlo Covini, and Ms. Åsa Degerman. Mr. Covini is Project Manager, Marketing Textiles at Lenzing, an international textile production company that for the past 80 years has taken responsibility for our planet's future by producing fibers made from natural wood. Mr. Selby is the CFO and Deputy CEO of Spinnova, a Finnish company that has innovated a technology that enables making textile fibers from wood pulp without chemicals or water-intensive processes. And Ms. Degerman, Project Manager for Once More, the world's first large-scale process for recycling blended fabrics, launched by Södra, the largest forest owner association in Sweden. Welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. Yeah, it's a pleasure to join you here today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
If you don't mind, I'll start with you, Mr. Selby. Fashion and forest may not seem like an obvious pairing. What motivated Spinnova to focus on trees and forests for sustainable fibers?
I think that's a great question. So it's a little bit of a sad thing that the most widely used textile fibers in the world are synthetic. So polyester is actually more than half of the world's textile fiber production. And these are obviously derived from petroleum, and they contribute to about 64% of the global textile fiber production. So I think that the starting point is that we need alternatives from renewable sources that have a lower impact. That's why we're seeing that there's a lot of value to connect fashion and forest. And actually, wood and textile fibers, it's not a new thing. Like, there've been various ways of using wood for even more than a century. But what Spinnova is doing is different because our technology is using a mechanical process to make the fibers rather than a chemical process, which has been the way that they've historically processed wood into textile fiber. So that's minimizing the impact on the environment. That's why we're there. Also, wood-based fibers, they can be very sustainable when they're made with certified wood. And if you think about like what forests are used for now, actually like textiles are then a very high value product that is kind of lasting a lot longer than, for example, tissue paper or something like that. So we think that this is a really good use of wood or wood pulp more specifically. And then the process is also very efficient, so waste is not generated in the process. I think that the kind of final like big reason is also, if you think about the textile industry, and it's about 4% of global emissions contributing to that, and to have a meaningful impact given the size of that industry, you need a raw material that is available, and you can actually then substitute some of the more harmful traditional fibers that are being used. And that's where I think wood comes in, because there is an existing supply chain and a lot of availability there. And then I think the final kind of point to make is, so when we use wood, basically, we then want to use the most sustainable wood that there is, so FSC certified with a responsible supplier. But a very interesting thing about Spinnova's technology is we can use the same process for other raw materials. So, for example, agricultural waste like straw waste can be used in the same process to make textile fibers, and then the same with, for example, textile waste. So really closing the loop and having circular solutions within the fashion industry as well. But like I said, the reason we focus on wood now is the availability, so it's the opportunity to make the biggest impact in the near term.
Mr. Covini, how are trees transformed into fibers? What are the main steps in the production process?
The process starts from the renewable raw material wood, which is grown in sustainably managed forests and plantations. The production of our fibers takes place in two main steps. In the first step, dissolving wood pulp is produced in one of our 3 biorefinery sites. And in the second step, the pulp is transformed into fibers. Our production process is based on state-of-the-art and sustainable technology. This means high resource efficiency, high recovery rates for chemicals, and, where possible, closed loops for processed chemicals. Bioenergy and a range of valuable biorefinery products such as acetic acid, xylose, and furfural are also produced.
Thank you, Mr. Selby. What are the key steps in Spinnova's production process?
Yeah, so the first step comes from what we get from the raw material supplier. So we have basically paper pulp sheets that are produced by Suzano from basically the wood, and that's then the same process that they would use for producing wood pulp generally. So we start with that, and then the process goes that is then mechanically refined, and it's then converted into a spinning ready fiber suspension. So it's basically a kind of mixture. You can almost say it looks a bit like the consistency of like hand cream or something like that. And that then cream is taken and it's then spun into filament fibers, which are dried, and then they're collected. And those fibers can then be cut into different lengths, crimped or treated with other methods as needed by the textile industry. And I think, like kind of anecdote, that the whole original idea actually came from our founders, and our both of our founders are physicists rather than chemists, which is why this is actually again a mechanical process, and it's all about actually kind of flow dynamics. And the original inspiration comes from this kind of biomimicry idea of how a spider actually spins its web, that it's the same effectively kind of way that they produce silk is the underlying kind of way that our fiber is also produced. Yeah, that's the inspiration. Yeah, as said, it then doesn't use any harmful chemicals in our process, and we don't generate waste or pollution because it is purely mechanical.
Mr. Covini, what distinguishes modal, lyocell, viscose, cupro, and similar wood-based fibers? How do their sustainability profiles differ, and how do they compare to each other? Additionally, are these fibers utilized independently, or are they commonly blended with other types of fibers in textile production?
Lenzing produces 3 generations of fibers: viscose, modal, and lyocell. The lyocell production process is the most modern method for producing fibers from wood. It has been successfully applied on an industrial scale for about 25 years and is particularly environmentally responsible, an alternative to the complex viscose and modal production process. The underlying idea of the lyocell process is to dissolve and process the pulp in a closed loop without any chemical derivatization. In comparison to the lyocell process, Lenzing viscose and modal fibers are produced from pulp in a multi-stage chemical process, from sustainable wood and in the most environmentally friendly way possible. The most important blending partners for lyocell fibers are cotton and polyester, where lyocell is particularly valued for its positive influence on the feel and its very good moisture management. However, lyocell can also be blended with many other fibers, such as wool, linen, or acrylic. Lenzing offers various specialty grades that enable a wide range of application.
You, Mr. Selby. In your perspective, what are the primary obstacles hindering the transformation of the industry towards sustainability, and how can these challenges be addressed?
Yeah, so I think we have to look at the whole system. So the fashion industry is accounting for around 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and it requires, again, a combined effort from the brands, from their supply chain partners that are then making the fibers, the fabrics, and the garments, and then policymakers and legislators, and of course then bringing in investors as well, and not to mention the consumers. And we're obviously very happy to see that there's a lot of legislation kind of coming through in particularly the European Union. But would say that of course there can always be more if we want to really hit the ambitious sustainability targets of the EU. So the goal is that by 2030 for the EU textile market, that all textile products placed in the EU market are durable, repairable, and recyclable. And this is really a huge feat to achieve in that time frame when you consider that only about 1% of clothes now globally are recycled into new clothes. And there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built up to achieve that. And then also you need the right raw materials to recycle. So low quality materials are more difficult to recycle. So we need to rapidly, if we want to make this change a reality, we need to rapidly scale up material innovations such as Spinovas and widely introduce them to the market. And this is going to require more investment. And yeah, that's what the world needs. And in order to then really push that through, it's then also a combined effort with the supply chain and brands that then need to also make long-term commitments to basically supporting the development of new fibers so that we can actually make a change here.
Ms. Degerman, you've launched a pioneering solution in recycling blended fabrics. What inspired Sodra to embark on the journey of developing the world's first large-scale process for recycling blended fabrics?
Yes, 2019 we launched once more. And what really inspired us from Södra was that we already for nearly 10 years had been producing dissolving wood pulp. We come from the forest. We are owned by 52,000 forest owners in southern part of Sweden. And our mission is to refine the forest as a raw material and make the most out of it. And we saw the trend on the market, and we saw the legislation coming already by 2016 with circular economy and new circular concepts. And we will also triggered and inspired by the thought that we could, since textile is also, or cotton is also based on cellulosic fibers, same as the wood and the forest. So we had an idea of this might also work. So since the forest is also based on cellulosic fiber, equally as textile, we had this idea that we might combine the two different process, or the textile with the forest. Therefore, we created a project, and we also have help from PhD students from Chalmers University in Gothenburg. And then 2016, I think the idea was born and invented, and then finally 2019 we launched it. So I think it was both a combination of our technical background and product industry background with the forest, but also the trends on the market, more waste from resource, creating resources from waste. And here we had a golden opportunity with our experience. So that's how Once More was initiated and born.
Can you elaborate on how the process works?
So the process works like this: that we have a technique where we can take on both polyester and cotton blended fabric. Um, so we collect both from industry laundries, but also from household goods, and then we have partners in Europe that sort out these textiles for us. So we have a polycotton blend, polyester and cotton. It's then transported back to our mill, which is located in south of Sweden, in Mörrum. And there we cut it and we shred it, and then we dissolve it, and we have a separation process. And this is the uniqueness with Once More, that we can actually separate out the polyester from the cotton. That means that we can close the loop for more cotton textiles, since we can take the combination of the mixed material. This pulp, textile pulp, is then, after this being dissolved, is then mixed with the wood chips and the wood pulp, and then it's dried, and it comes out as pulp, dissolving textile wood pulp, that then goes further along in the value chain. And the next step is that we sell this to fiber producers such as Lensing, that we also have a close collaboration with.
How does the unique combination of recycled textile and wood fibers contribute to reducing the environmental impact of the textile industry? Can you share specific examples of metrics that highlight the positive environmental outcomes of implementing your solution?
So Once More, the process is both about circularity, but it's also about environmental impact. And describing the circularity, so you can look upon it that we are avoiding emissions by actually closing the loop for textile waste. So we can produce more from less, but we can also look at it on a life cycle assessment and in the environmental impact. And we have made LCA and compared it to generic viscose, which is made in China. And there you can see that we have a better footprint than the general viscose, both in terms of biodiversity, energy consumption, water consumption, but also in the carbon emissions, that we are lowering carbon emissions by actually producing Once More, because we are both resource efficient and we also have a very energy saving process in the Murrow mill. So I would say it's a win-win situation, both circularity but also the reduction of carbon emissions. So if you if you want to understand more, you can go to our website and then you can download our environmental impact report and read through all the data and the proof points.
Thank you, Mr. Selby. There might be concerns about depleting forests if they become a primary source of fibres. How does Spinnova ensure the protection and health of forests, considering they're a key resource for your sustainable fibres?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is that our mission is to produce the most sustainable textile materials. So we only work with then raw materials and support that, and then specifically when it comes to the wood-based raw material, that then only with companies that have a strict zero deforestation policy. So in that sense, what Spinnova is doing here is not having any depletion effect, and we are only using then certified materials. And a lot of this then comes down to our key partner, Suzano, who only harvest is from planted farms, so they are not basically cutting down any native forests. It's almost staggering, like, to hear the amount of trees that they are planting every day. They are planting 1.2 million trees every day, and these are then grown, harvested, replanted in a 6 to 7 year life cycle, and it's a very regenerative business model. And the use of eucalyptus is basically a very good choice of plant because it is very efficient at getting the most amount of biomass out of a hectare of land, and it's much more efficient than then using other crops. And I think this is like one of the key points that why forests again. Well, it's much preferable to other sort of crop-based forms of fiber production, like cotton is having a huge impact on land use, on water use, and chemical use, but because they need pesticides, they need fertilizer if they're not organically grown. And by contrast, wood is getting its water directly from the soil. It's not needing additional water usage. It's not needing pesticides. It's not needing fertilizer to grow. So there are many benefits of using wood. And as kind of commented, the way that, again, Suzano is approaching it is that they are only cultivating on land that's been previously degraded by other farming practices. So I think the short conclusion is that we are not depleting the forests by using wood. It's rather actually supporting the development of the forests, and there are many other initiatives that Suzano has to help with biodiversity, and also investing in making sure that they preserve native forest that is not used for the plantations and so on. But I think if we think really long term, it's back to the fact that in the short term, it's very good that we use these virgin raw materials so that we can have as big an impact as possible on the global textile market, and we need that kind of large supply that you get from wood. But in the long run, we want the whole kind of a system to be circular, and then the raw material can come from other sources such as agricultural waste or textile waste, and that's something that Spinnova can basically also do with the same technology.
Mr. Covini, how does Lenzing integrate sustainability and circularity into its operations and products?
Circularity and sustainability are very important for Lenzing. To make the vision a reality, Lenzing follows 6 main practices that embed various elements of the circular economy into its business model. Our Refibra technology is an example for our contribution in circularity, where we reuse cotton textile waste as a raw material in addition to wood to produce cellulosic fibers. Still, the transition to a truly circular economy requires collaboration between several parties. As Lenzing only represents one part of the textile value chain, it is important to make cooperations. As an example, we would like to mention our partnership with Södra here. Together, we develop methods to facilitate the broader use of cellulosic-based used textiles on an industrial scale.
you, Mr. Selby. Have wood-based fibres, such as those produced by Spinnova, already entered into the mainstream market? Additionally, considering the perception of sustainable clothing being expensive, how does Spinnova position itself in terms of affordability? Where do you see growth potential, especially in which sectors?
Yeah, I think there is a huge potential for man-made cellulosic fibers to grow. So they're only about 6% of annual global textile fiber production at the moment. And these are mainly made from wood-based resources, although hopefully over time the share produced from recycled or waste sources will also grow. But the demand that the fashion industry is facing, it's projected that there will be 133 million ton shortage of lower impact materials in supply, and these could be made from natural resources, wood-based cellulose or other cellulose sources. And let's say the focus of this is, the biggest part of the textile market is the apparel and fashion sector. So that's about 75 to 85% of the global fiber market. And a large majority of the global brands have made commitments to significantly improving their environmental footprint. And the biggest lever that they can pull to do that is to look at the raw material that they're using in their collections, and so kind of working on and using more sustainable materials is key to them. But I think you're right that when these type of new innovations are scaling up, of course, then they haven't yet reached their most efficient price point, and it does mean that there is a need for brands and consumers to also be visionary in the short term, that there will be some price premium whilst these type of innovations are scaling up. And then over time, of course, it is expected that then the cost efficiencies can come through and making it kind of even more mainstream available. But I think this is also a kind of key, let's say, message to essentially almost like a call to arms for what is needed in the world, that it really needs a combined approach from like the brands, from consumers, from investors, from legislators, so that we can actually make this work, because one way or another we have to put in place the kind of incentives to make these type of new innovations move forward, because it's clear that the world needs them.
Ms. Degerman, what is Sodra's future goal, and what are the main challenges in achieving it?
If I first would like to describe the goal for once more on Södra, it's we have a clear mission that within medium term, within 5 years, to scale up. We are now at a level of 2,000 tons of textile waste that we are closing the loop for. And within 5 years or so, we are aiming for 50,000 tons. So it's quite a big step that we are embarking upon. And I think the challenge here is really that we are just in the infancy, in the beginning of collecting and sorting textile waste. We know that the Waste Framework Directive will be implemented in Europe by 1st of January 2025, and then we will actually start to collect waste. But it's a whole ecosystem that needs to be built up. It's about collection, but also about pre-sorting and sorting, and also defining the fractions and the standards that needs to be sorted for. And we need to create and develop new business models, because there will be new partners and new organizations and businesses in this ecosystem. And we also have the EPR, the Extended Producer Responsibility, coming in after 2025. Timeline for that is still to be defined by the European Commission and the member states. But for us, it's really to push this change in the right direction, and also to make it harmonized within Europe. And that, I think, is the challenge, but also the opportunity. So for us, then it needs to be a better developed ecosystem, and it will take time to make this happen. just to make a reference to the paper for recycling industry that we for more than 40 years have been collecting and recycling used paper, etc. And still we are at a level of 65 to 70% of recycling rate. And I think we have extremely high ambitions within textile, and you can see in the textile strategy also that we are aiming for full circularity by 2030. But so I think the challenge is that it's a jigsaw, and there's a lot of new initiatives and technique that needs to be developed, and to make this in a rather fast and quick way, but also so everyone are aligned and take the next step together. So I think this is the ecosystem is the biggest challenge, but also the opportunity where we can push.
Thank you, Mr. Selby, Mr. Covini, and Ms. Degerman for joining us today and for sharing invaluable pieces of information. We have a lot to reflect on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on the UN Forest podcast here today. I truly enjoyed the conversation, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share insights with you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to join.
To make sustainable fabrics, we need sustainable threads. To make sustainable threads, we need sustainable fibres. To make sustainable fibres, we need trees. Additionally, forest-based fabrics are still a small percentage, only 6.4% of the clothing industry, and constitute a tiny amount of the use of wood fibre from our forests. However, looking at numbers, business projections, and the market's ever-increasing awareness of sustainability, this seems to be just the beginning of something much larger. Let's now hear from Ms. Paula Deda, Director of the Forests, Land and Housing Division at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, on the work on forests for fashion.
Thank you very much, Samata. I'm happy to join you today, and on behalf of UNECE, thank you Mr. Selby, Mr. Covini, and Ms. Degerman for the brilliant discussion. With an estimated worth of $2.5 trillion, the global fashion industry produces 100 billion items each year, 20% of which go unsold. What's more, less than 1% of materials used to produce garments is recycled into new clothing. It is clear that the fashion industry and textile industry are far from being sustainable. Here at UNECE, we work on placing sustainability at the core of fashion. One of our main projects is the Forest for Fashion initiative, which we launched in 2013 together with our partners to encourage sustainable production and consumption patterns and promote responsible forest management. Through communication and outreach activities, exhibitions, and engagement with the design community, the Forest for Fashion initiative aims to demonstrate how forest fibers can still be both fashionable and highly marketable, while contributing to a greener and circular economy and a more sustainable future. We believe that sometimes sustainability is a simple choice. It is just a matter of having the information on what choice is best, and this is what we strive to do with this podcast. Provide people with information and tips on how to incorporate circularity and sustainability in their consumption patterns. From buying clothes made of wood fibers to recycling garments, we can all make our wardrobe more sustainable. But remember, the most sustainable piece of clothing is the one that is already in your closet. And with that, allow me to thank the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry of Finland for funding the production of the UN Forest podcast. And thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Goodbye.